Well, if we're all sitting comfortably, shall we begin?
Good evening, and Kate Neil-Falcha, 100,000 welcomes to you all to our Glasgow Unitarian Zoom service, where tonight's topic puts me back on more familiar ground, science and Genesis. I hope you find that your time tonight rewarding, and there'll be an opportunity at the end for you all to make a contribution, should you so desire. As always, we'll begin our service with our chalice lighting, and the words I've chosen are from the ICUU Global Chalice Lighting. Could we have the chalice, please? The light of the sun does not lift the shadows that have fallen on humanity the world over. We relight our chalice flame to reignite a spirit of radical optimism, to dispel those who would divide us. All manner of things will be well if we make them well. May our free religious communities embody the right relationships our world so desperately needs. Thank you. One of the blessings or curses of lockdown, depending on your personal perspective, is the time made available to browse the internet in search of articles of interest. One such discovery I made recently concerns the work of the American physicist, Dr. Gerald Schroeder. Schroeder received a PhD in nuclear physics and earth and planetary sciences back in 1965 from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He worked 7 years on the staff of MIT Physics Department, and he has been a member of the United States Atomic Energy Commission. After emigrating to Israel in 1971, Schroeder was employed as a researcher at the Weizmann Institute of Science, the Volcani Research Institute, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He is currently teaching at Aish HaTorah College of Jewish Studies. As you may have gathered, Schroeder is an Orthodox Jew, and much of his writings concerns his attempting to reconcile his Orthodox Jewish faith with his commitment to science. His books include Genesis and the Big Bang, 1990, The Science of God, 1997, The Hidden Face of God, 2002, and God, according to God, 2009. It is some of his ideas I hope briefly to discuss this evening, and I hope you find it of interest. Now to our opening hymn. All our hymns this evening are from the Green Book, the first being hymn 7, Source of All Being. Thank you. I now invite Barry to give us our first reading. Barry.
Artifacts and fossils of that prehistoric animal Neanderthal man have been found. For the theologians steeped in a superficial reading of Genesis, these fossils may be Neanderthal, but they have nothing to do with man. For the paleontologist, the age of the fossils also presents a problem, but of a different sort. The bones of Neanderthal man are too old to date using carbon-14 methods, so much of the original skeletal carbon-14 has decayed. One half of the original content decays radioactively each 5,600 years. That the small amount of carbon-14 remaining cannot be reliably measured. The bones' location when within geologically known strata gives them an estimated age of 60,000 years. For many other people, Jews and Christians alike, a 60,000-year archaeological history is at least 54,000 years in error. It is totally at odds with a literal understanding of the opening chapters of the book of Genesis. But this discord between archaeology and theology is neither necessary nor valid. As I have studied the details of biblical and scientific texts, I have reached what, for me, was an enlightening and unexpected conclusion. The biblical narrative and the scientific account of our Genesis are two mutually compatible descriptions of the same single and identical reality.
Thank you, Barry. Part 1, Genesis and the Big Bang. So, I'm browsing through YouTube and the algorithm throws up a video that a physicist has shown that the account of creation in Genesis chapter 1 is correct. Now, normally I would ignore such things, assuming it was some Ken Ham production or the like. But the word physicist aroused my interest. There wasn't much on the telly, so I clicked on it. And I must confess, I'm rather glad I did. Now, we know that Genesis chapter 1 tells us that God created the universe in 6 days. And we also know that science tells us that the universe is approximately 14 billion years old. The thrust of Schroeder's argument is that both these statements are correct. How he performs the seemingly impossible task of equating 6 days with 14 billion years is down to time dilation. Einstein gave us the theory of general and special relativity over 100 years ago. And according to Einstein, space and time are not constant. They can be stretched. How we experience space and time from our own point of view, or to use a scientific term, our frame of reference, can vary. For example, traveling very fast distorts time so that for the traveler, time slows down. The most famous illustration of this is the example known as the twin paradox, which goes something like this. Consider twins. One leaves Earth on a spaceship and travels close to the speed of light to a planet 7 light years away. He stays a short while and returns back to Earth. On Earth, the twin who remained behind has aged 14 years, according to his frame of reference. The twin who has traveled to the distant planet and back has only aged 2 years due to the effects of time dilation, according to his frame of reference. And there is now, when the twins are reunited, a 12-year age difference between them. This is the twin paradox. Gravity can also distort time. Clocks run ever so slightly slower in Glasgow than, say, at the top of Ben Nevis, since Ben Nevis is further away from the centre of the Earth, and gravity is slightly weaker there. Clocks on satellites run at different rates from those on Earth, so we have to keep refreshing our sat-navs. Otherwise, we'd very quickly get the wrong information and be lost. Some people say that time runs very slowly when I am teaching, but I can honestly say that is scientifically unproven. So back to Schroeder. Schroeder states that from our point of view, from our frame of reference, looking back to the point of creation, 14 billion years have indeed elapsed. Science is correct. However, from the point of view of the origin of the universe, from the frame of reference of the origin of the universe, or if you prefer, from God's point of view, accounting for time dilation, the universe is only 5.5 days old. Creation is still going on, and the eternal Sabbath or day of rest is yet to happen. It took me a wee while to take this in, and I was still slightly skeptical And I said to the screen, as if Dr. Schroeder could possibly hear me, aye, right, show me the maths. He showed me the maths. Now, it's quite possible to argue with a philosophical position, but I find it really hard to argue with the maths. The physics is good, the maths is good, but what does it all mean? Did the Almighty impart the knowledge of relativity to Moses or some other ancient Hebrew priest? Did they work it out for themselves and this knowledge was lost in time? Is it all just a coincidence? I guess it raises a lot more questions than it answers. While we think about this, let's take some time out for some private prayer or meditation, accompanied rather unusually this evening by the sound of a black hole. Thank you. And now back over to Barry for our second reading. Barry.
The problem so many people, believers as well as skeptics, have with God really isn't with God. It's with the stunted perception of the biblical creator of our magnificent universe that we imbibe in our youthful years. As children, we yearn for a larger-than-life figure who can guide and protect us. Our parents fulfill part of that mission, but the parent-like image of an infinite, error-free God is even more assuring to our young minds. So we grow up retaining this childhood notion of an all-powerful, ever-present, ever-involved, never-erring creator. Unfortunately, that image fails utterly when, as adults, we discover that the facts of life are often brutally at odds with this popular, though misguided, piece of wisdom. It's no wonder that atheists chortle at the idea of such a God. We are about to correct that misperception, and in doing so, we will develop an understanding of the divine as made manifest in our world. What is the God of the Bible? What can I expect from him or her or it? What can I demand? Does God want me to make demands? Why did the God of the Bible tell Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, his and Sarah's only child? Does God want us to argue when we confront what appears to be divine injustice, or are we merely to accept the slap and turn the other cheek? When I feel the surge of emotion at the beauty of star-studded sky, or the joy of a baby's smile, is that a part of the same transcendent God that created a less than perfect world? And if there really is a God, why so often is God's presence so fully hidden that even in the Bible people wonder, is there a God among us? An obvious and predictable God would be so much easier to understand. By abandoning preconceived notions of the author of creation and replacing them with the Bible's description and nature's display of God, we will learn about God according to God. The surprise is that many of the episodes in the Bible mirror with alarming fidelity life as we experience it.
Thank you, Barry. Part 2, proof of God in under 5 minutes. Having enjoyed Schroeder's previous video, I couldn't resist another, especially one entitled Proof of God in Under 5 Minutes. Schroeder opens his argument with a question. How can I, scientist, really believe that there is something that we usually refer to as God, this metaphysical whatever, acting in the world or producing the world. He then boldly proclaims, the irony is that the question is really a non-starter. Science has in fact discovered God. And you can talk to the hard-lined atheists and they will say, yeah, it looks like science has indeed discovered God. A bold claim indeed. Let's look at how he arrives at such a conclusion. Barry, could you share our image, please? This is a well-known diagram in physics. In fact, we use it in schools when we are teaching the Big Bang to students. This is a diagram that shows the development of the universe from the creation of our time. Every word on this diagram comes from the NASA website. Nothing has been added or taken away. This diagram represents the condensed knowledge of the scientific community of how the universe was created and how it got to be where we are today. From the left to the right is a timeline. We start from a burst of energy at the extreme left of the diagram and end up at the far right with the oval shape to indicate expansion in all directions. Each of the vertical lines you can see represents 1 billion years. Vertically, we are trying to show 3 dimensions of space in 1 dimension, which of course is difficult to portray on a single piece of paper, but hopefully you'll be able to follow what's going on. It's worthwhile mentioning at this point that it shows on the extreme left that there is a beginning to the universe. As Schroeder points out, excuse me, some 50 years ago, if he were teaching this at MIT, he would be likely to lose tenure for saying there is a creation to the universe. At that time, the overwhelming scientific opinion was that the universe was eternal. There was never a beginning. The Bible got it wrong in its very first sentence. Then in 1964, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson at Bell Labs in New Jersey discovered the echo of the Big Bang. This was the energy left over from the Big Bang which George Gamow had predicted. A universe created hot and small would have exploded, and the energy would get more dilute as the universe expanded. Overnight, the Bible was shown to be right. There was a beginning to the universe. Now, the black of the diagram on the outside represents nothing. It is not a vacuum. Vacuums are within the diagram, that is within this cone of expansion. Vacuums are empty space, and space is something. The black of the paper around the diagram is nothing. Now, this doesn't fit in our human brain comfortably because humans tend to think in a box made of time, space, matter, energy. And none of us, no human, is clever enough to think outside this box. So when we say outside the diagram, we can use the words, but we can't conceive it. It just doesn't fit with the human brain. If you look to the left of the diagram, the words you won't find are G-O-D. What you will find are the words quantum fluctuations. The universe allows creation of something from nothing, provided you have the laws of nature, that is, the laws of quantum physics and the laws of relativity. These laws of nature are not physical. However, they act on the physical. So if they create the universe, it means they must predate the universe. So now we have a set of forces we call the laws of nature that are 1, not physical, 2, that are able to act on the physical, 3, that create the physical from absolute nothing, and 4, predate the universe, which means they predate our understanding and experience of time. Put that together and it sounds very familiar. If you haven't noticed it, according to Schroeder, this is the biblical definition of God, i.e., God is 1, not physical, 2, is able to act on the physical, 3, creates the physical from absolute nothing, and 4, predates the universe. With this definition of God, then, he concludes, science has indeed discovered God. This is what he says, and I quote, "There is one nuance that is left hanging. Is that which created the universe active in the universe? Up to that point, science says you're correct. The definition of the biblical God predates time. God is not a physical being, but a force and creates the universe. You will notice in the opening chapter of Genesis, the only name for God is Elohim, God as manifest in the universe. So science has indeed discovered the biblical God. There is one question left. Is that which created the universe active in the universe? The universe itself and the very fact that you are listening now pretty much establishes that point. After all, if the laws of nature didn't cultivate this moment in time, would you be listening now?" Unquote. While we pause for a while to reflect on this, let's sing our second hymn, 26, Spirit Divine, Attend Our Prayer. Part 3, the problem. A few years ago, I attended an interfaith meeting in Glasgow, where we were given presentations by two scientists. The first, a biologist and fundamentalist Christian, who spent some time describing in great detail the complexities of a cell. This, he maintained, was proof of the existence of God. No problem so far. This is a well-established deist argument. However, he then made one almighty leap of faith. If there was a God, then the Bible is true and Jesus rose from the dead. Now, this assertion, to say the least, was not warmly received by the audience, much to the consternation of the speaker, who seemed somewhat frustrated as to why no one else was following the logic of his argument. How this young man came to believe in the resurrection and biologists at the same time is really quite simple. The Bible says it's true, so it must be true. Our second speaker was an astrophysicist and Muslim. She described her total trust in the Quran as the foundation of her faith and proceeded to discuss how the Quran encouraged scientific learning and supported education for women. Again, so far so good. But then she stated, in response to an audience question, that she believed jinn are real because the Quran said so. For those unfamiliar with jinn, symbologist Michelle Snyder informs us, quote, "The jinn is a popular character better known as a genie. The jinn in esoteric myth is attributed to an Arabian tradition spirit formed of more subtle matter and of a higher order than humans. There are many kinds of jinn. Some say they are composed of air and were created thousands of years before humans, but like humans will be destroyed at the last judgment. Jinn are hard to kill and long-lived, but they can be killed by comets flung from heaven and can kill each other. The Quranic tradition says that they were created from fire and have fire in their veins. According to the Quran, Solomon employed them to help build his temple. How this young woman can believe in genies and be an astrophysicist at the same time is again really quite simple. The Quran says they are real, so they must be real. On another occasion, I was travelling past the rather beautiful Trinity Church in the south side of Glasgow when I spotted this large poster displayed outside. Historical proof of the resurrection, it proclaimed. I was immediately reminded of the words of the biblical scholar Bart Ehrman. The purpose of history is to gather evidence, preferably first-hand evidence, and preferably evidence from independent multiple sources, to determine what most likely happened in the past. By their very definition, miraculous events are the least likely to have occurred. If they weren't, they wouldn't be miracles. So how can history, whose purpose is to determine what most likely happened, prove an event which is least likely to have happened? And here, I think, is the crux of the matter. When you invest your life or your faith in the teachings of an ancient book, and that ancient book contains elements which are, let's be charitable here, problematic to the modern reader, it is natural to turn to science, to history, to archaeology, to bail you out of your difficulty. Now, please note, this is a one-way street. On the 3rd of March this year, scientists at CERN in Geneva, which operates the Large Hadron Collider, the largest particle physics laboratory in the world, announced the discovery of 4 brand new elementary particles. At no time, as far as I am aware, did the scientists at CERN refer to any ancient holy books to check if their discovery was correct. As for Dr. Schroeder, his commitment to Torah has presented him with these same difficulties. To be fair, he is at least trying to stay true to his physics when attempting to resolve these difficulties. His proposition that the universe is 5.5 days old from the frame of reference of the point of origin due to time dilation, I cannot find fault with. His math seems good. However, I do not think there is any evidence that the ancient Hebrews had an understanding of relativity. It would be rather an odd thing as well for the Almighty to bestow on them at that stage in human development this knowledge. Perhaps the knowledge of penicillin or some dental skills to stop people dying from dental abscesses would have been a more appropriate gift. I think in this case, we are simply dealing with happy coincidence. As for Schroeder's proof of God, I must admit his definition of God as being non-physical, able to act in the physical, creates the physical from absolute nothing, and predates the universe is perfectly acceptable to me, even if it sounds a bit more like the Force in Star Wars. I am less convinced by his conclusion about how this divine force interacts with the universe. That was a little bit too rushed for my liking. From my viewpoint or frame of reference, it is perhaps better to take a more reasoned approach to ancient holy scriptures, thus avoiding the need to explain away difficulties. Here's what Rabbi Sherman Wein, the founder of the Society for Humanistic Judaism, had to say about his holy book. Quote, "The Hebrew Bible is not a work of history, but it is some of the earliest evidence available to interpret and discover the true origins and early history of the Jewish people. It is also a complex compilation of theology, ethics, and literature that contemporary Jews should grapple with, even if they choose to reject some of its values and its authority. We must recognize that holy books from whatever tradition have played an important part in our history for millennia. It is good to listen to the voices from the past, but we must not allow our values and belief to be dictated to us by these voices. Thank you for listening. I would like you all now to contribute, if you choose, on a discussion of these matters. And if you would like to speak, please make yourself known to Ali. Thank you for listening.
I've got an advantage over you. I have to apologize for. I've got a copy of Jim's sermon in front of me. And even with that, I have to explain how challenged I am. My head is still spinning, and I've read through this thing 3 or 4 times today. It's heavy going, but fascinating stuff. So I'm not quite sure how you're going to feel about discussing, trying to remember the raft of stuff that we've heard, but I find it absolutely fascinating. I really do.
Thank you, Barry.
I wanted to mention actually the bit where you were talking about there being absolutely nothing. And you're absolutely right, because I'm like, you know, trying to get my head around the thought of absolutely nothing. But when I think about absolutely nothing, I'm not thinking about nothing, if you see what I mean. I cannot, it just does not compute.
It doesn't, human brains aren't designed to cope with this concept. We like to construct in our brains something that we can relate to. The idea of a beginning to time, what was there before time? What was there before space? What is nothing is pretty much something that we cannot cope with. We're just not designed to cope with it. So don't feel upset if you can't cope with it. Hi, Margaret.
Right, you of course will have heard nothing exists. If anything exists, it cannot be known. If anything is known, it cannot be expressed.
Who was that from, Margaret?
Some ancient Greek.
Ah.
So that's nothing exists. If anything exists, it cannot be known. If anything is known, it cannot be expressed.
I'm not getting my head around that either.
Thank you for sharing that, Margaret. Hi, Donald.
Hi, I think I follow the idea that the four characteristics that you mentioned could describe either an ultimate cause or God. I think the key question comes down now, is there a intention behind it, or did it just happen by itself without intention? So as humans, we scour our existence and the world looking for clues, whether there's a mind behind it or whether the ultimate driving force is a personality in some sense that we could in some way relate to. And I think that idea is in Genesis as well. In Genesis 1, where it says that man was made in God's image. So I think that's where it leads us. This key question is the ultimate driver of our ultimate source of our existence. Does it have intention and personality, or is it impersonal?
Indeed. A good point. Hi, John.
Yeah, to me, it's a matter of quite selective taking of the material, because the God that is presented in Genesis is the God who has chosen the Israelites as the chosen people. And that is part and parcel of the Jewish concept of God, that they are chosen ones, that they have been chosen. And there was some debate about, well, what is their role as chosen ones? Why weren't they the favored ones if they were chosen? But there was no real debate about them being the chosen ones, I don't think. So if that is also part and parcel of the Jewish presentation of God, I don't see how that fits in to this mathematical description of an unknowable mover.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I was just going to express my alignment with my agreement with Donald, first of all, and then with John. I think that our human ideas of God cannot escape, well, maybe they can eventually, but everything that we are told about him by these Axial Age religions is about personification. And it's about, the assumption is that the universe is run by something that is at least an expansion of a human mind. And that, to me, doesn't carry absolutely irrefutable truth. And it leaves us in a strange position in which there are elements of the universe which physicists like the one that was being mentioned by Jim. Physicists can have a field day about lovely diagrams like that, but actually it doesn't really affect the way in which human beings interrelate. It doesn't affect how we think about ourselves, and it doesn't affect the way in which we behave. Very interesting, yes, and I find some of these ideas just incomprehensible, like so many people have said. So yes, I agree that the basis of the kind of religion that Christianity has promulgated is a personification of a power in the universe that is above all. Fair enough. I can't see that there's any necessity to believe in that. And I also admired John's description. The God of the Israelites is indeed a very, very tribal God. Is a God that is our God, a God that the idea is that the power of the universe is on our side. And I'm sorry, I can't believe in that either.
Thank you, Ian.
I'll just bring a couple of quick things, if I may. One is the thoughts of a former cleric on the 20th century called Anthony Freeman, who was a young Anglican priest who was defrocked for absolutely straightforwardly saying something which I absolutely hold to, and Stephen knows what I'm about to say. People are not, God did not make man, man makes God. And Freeman was bold enough as a young cleric to say it, and he got defrocked for saying it. The other thing I would like to bring is slightly cheeky, but I like it. Irvin Welsh, the author of Trainspotting, had something to say about this question: is God still among us? Or maybe did he create it and then disappear? And he created something in a short story called The Acid House, where this young boy in Granson ended up speaking to someone he came to realize was actually God. He was sitting next to him. What? No, you can't. Well, I am. And the character playing God, who was the actor Maurice Reeve, a very down-to-earth actor known for playing down-to-earth characters, said to him, "Nah, I am. Nietzsche was wrong, I'm no deed. I just didn't get stuff on him here." And I found that such a smile. But it's Irvin Welsh's thoughts, not mine.
Thank you, Barry.
I really wanted to echo Barry that mankind needs a God, needs the idea of God. It helps to keep successive generations all around the world being their best selves. That something matters.
Yes.
I do believe in God. I don't know what it doesn't matter what God is called. I do believe. I don't believe. I mean, there are only two alternatives: is that either God created or started the universe, which of course is absolutely enormous. You probably is absolutely enormous, or it started of itself. And I don't believe that. Well, that seems to me impossible. So I don't know what that follows from, but I do actually believe that something must have started it, especially because of what the Big Bang. It seems to be extraordinary that the Big Bang occurs, the universe suddenly starts, even if it starts on a very small scale. and it's orderly. I remember that Donald and I went to a interesting talk by a chap. Now, what was it called, Donald? We went to that one, the lecture we heard down in
down in Wigtown. We went to hear.
That's right, down.
We
And
went
he
to
was
hear John Gray, the philosopher, about
yes,
7 types of atheism.
that's right, 7 times of atheism. Yes. Well, I told him actually. I said why I'm not an atheist. I can be an agnostic. I have been an agnostic for some time, but I'm not an agnostic now, really, because I do think that something must have started it all, because it's all orderly. I mean, what amazes me that it isn't all just chaos. You know, after the Big Bang, how did it start with the Big Bang, but end up with order? So I'll shut up that way.
Thank you,
Ian.
Stephen.
I just want to add to what I was saying. Although I cannot believe in the kind of pictures of God that has been passed down to me by Judaism and Christianity and some other religions too, I nevertheless think that the world is, I cannot be a total atheist in the sense that the world has many forces in it that we don't understand. And particularly, it's a lot of things about human beings that we don't understand. And we live in a world of human beings. At the moment, we are the dominant species on the planet. And unfortunately, we have to live with ourselves, which is not easy because we're difficult people to live with. But there's no way in which I would describe myself as a non-worshipping person. I worship the mystery. But the Judeo-Christian teachings about God, I'm sorry, I think I've passed beyond that.
Thank you, Ian. After the service, if folk want to continue the discussion, that would be a good opportunity to do so. So thank you everyone for contributing. And I think we should bring matters to conclusion with our final hymn, 226, Song of Peace. Thank you all for your contributions, especially to Barry and Ali for putting together the service this evening. I have sent a brief summary of tonight's service with links to the website of Dr. Schroeder, if anyone would like to explore what he has to say further. And in the meantime, I wish you all a very good evening. Can we extinguish the chalice, please?